During 2024, more than 30 million people across the Southern Africa region have been affected by a severe drought. There's currently a large resource mobilization effort that's been launched by the UN and the SADC community, trying to mobilize about 5.5 billion just to help the communities that have been affected. One of the key institutions we have in the region are our river basin organizations. So this session is specifically going to look at the role that the river basins can play, particularly in terms of contributing to building drought resilience. Now, to kick off our session, we are joined by Mr. Alex Simalabwe, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Secretary, as well as the Global Director for Climate Resilience for the Africa Water Climate Investment Program, and he will do our welcoming remarks. I'd like to invite Alex to the podium before I introduce the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. It's great to just walk in and within the first minute you're on the podium. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just on time. Do we have online viewers?
Yes. Okay,
excellent, because I think we also need to acknowledge them. So good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the Stockholm World Water Week, an event organized by SADC, the Southern Africa Development Community, as well as the Limpopo Basin Commission in partnership with the UNCCD, as well as UNDP, the Kuvelai Water Basin Commission, which is shared between Namibia and South Africa, and as well as ZAMCOM. So my special acknowledgements, of course, to the Executive Secretary Representative of SADC, Dr. Patrice Kabeya. I don't know whether he's online. As well as my counterparts, colleagues, executive secretaries of these river basin organizations I just mentioned, ZAMCOM, LIMCOM, COVECOM, BUBUSACOM, so many acronyms. I don't know if our international viewers are able to understand. But these are all river basins in Southern Africa. Transboundary water cooperation is a big revolution going on in the region, the strengthening of transboundary cooperation, and SADC is at the center of that. Distinguished delegates and participants, all protocols observed. It gives me great pleasure on behalf of the Global Water Partnership Southern Africa, for which I'm the Executive Secretary, to address you at this crucial session on promoting peace through transboundary water cooperation in the SADC region. As we gather here on the eve of the opening of the World Water Week 2024, I would like to highlight some of the key points that underscore the importance of our discussion this afternoon. First of all, the water challenge in SADC. SADC has 16 member states with a population of over 345 million as of 2018 and is experiencing increasing pressure on its water resources. Our region boasts of 15 international shared river basins among the SADC countries, but the equitable distribution of water resources remains a challenge, exacerbated by the impacts of climate change as well as influencing precipitation levels. 3 countries this year, led by their heads of states, Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, have declared a state of disaster for droughts. And this is affecting the Zambezi River Basin, the Limpopo River Basin. These are all shared rivers. And this has the potential for causing additional tension among the different countries. However, we at the Global Water Partnership and our partners in the different institutions that have been set up to manage river basins believe that our shared waters is a power force and conduit for cooperation and peace and not for conflict. Southern Africa has been known as a region of peace for many, many years. And our SADC leaders convene from time to time. The Republic of Zimbabwe just hosted the SADC Summit, heads of state, 17th of August in Zimbabwe, for which they also talked about the importance of having contingency measures being established to respond to drought impacts at the head of state level. So you have the leadership is there, but the climate change impacts are a challenge that our leaders and our partners in the river basin organizations have to contend with. The Global Water Partnership has been playing a critical role supporting our technical partners, the river basin organizations that I have just mentioned, in strengthening transboundary water cooperation, and starting first of all with a cooperation with the SADC Secretariat led by our colleagues in the SADC division responsible for water under the pillar of infrastructure, where they have developed a number of instruments over the years since 2002 to guide the management of water resources in the region, including starting with the water vision for water, life and the environment, which was established by SADC. And over the years, the regional water policy for SADC has been developed, including a policy on climate change, as well as various regional strategic action programs, which are rolling plans developed every 5 years, bring all the member states together and the technical partners such as the Global Water Partnership. So on behalf of GWP and our partners, I'm proud to highlight some of the key achievements in terms of progress. The governments of Namibia and as well as Angola recently launched a project supported by our partners, UNDP, on enhancing transboundary cooperation in what is called as the adjacent Kuvelai and Kunene transboundary river basin, worth $11.2 million. This is an initiative conceptualized UNDP, supported by the Global Water Environmental Facility, and also with GWP Southern Africa providing technical assistance. And we have just recently supported the two countries to appoint a regional coordinator, who I hope is also going to be on the panel. You'll be able to see him and he can speak for himself. Within the river basin shared between Mozambique and Zimbabwe is a basin called Bubusa. And GWP is proud with its partners, particularly the International Union for Conservation and Nature, IUCN, to have supported the two governments to reach an international agreement. Most of you may have seen, actually, social media posts when the two heads of states convened with their ministers behind them on water, putting that into agreement into effect. So we're very proud of that effort, but also to congratulate the governments as well as the Global Environmental Facility for having accompanied these countries on this journey with a funding of $6 million. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in the recent development, the Global Water Partnership congratulates the two governments for the ratification of the 4 agreements on the country's cooperation between Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And why do I highlight this Mozambique and Zimbabwe? Because most of you will remember the 2000 floods. You remember? The lady who gave a birth in a tree, do you remember that? So most of you remember, although Mozambique seems to have gone under the radar in terms of the impacts of climate change, it's still very much almost every year battered by cyclones. So management of these shared rivers between their neighbors, such as in the Limpopo Basin, as well as in the Bubusa Basin in Zimbabwe, is very, very critical because Mozambique is downstream. And that is the challenge that they face. GWPSA provided technical assistance to the two governments for the finalization of negotiations leading to the signing of the agreement on the management of the transboundary waters, also in partnership with SADC and GIZ, who also funded the activities. I'm also proud to highlight that also, as part of the Bubusa project, which is also now supporting the newly established secretariat with an interim coordinator. I hope he's going to be on the panel. My good brother, Madam Wombe, is here. He's going to be on the panel, and we are supporting him as the interim coordinator of the new regional institution called Bubusa.com to drive its secretariat establishment, strengthen institutions, as well as having all the policies that are required for it to function effectively on behalf of the two member states. Colleagues, let me also highlight the work that GWPSA that has been doing at a continental level. Again, working with UNDP, our partners, we have recently also signed an agreement to support the implementation of strengthening of blue economy among a number of island states on the African continent. SADC has a few of them, Madagascar, as well as Mauritius. Sorry about Malaysia, I was talking about the Malaysian minister recently, where I'm coming from. Madagascar and Mauritius, and there are others, Principe and Sao Tome. There is also Cape Verde. There are a number of these island states, but they face unique challenges. They are surrounded by oceans. Are they transboundary? Are they transboundary? They are transboundary in their own nature because they have got ocean currents. So the way they behave is quite different. So this is why, under the leadership of the EAA, African Union Commission, and UNDP, again, our partner, we are beginning to support that initiative to help bring these countries, but not only in Southern Africa, but as part of a continental initiative. And of course, most of you know about the Africa Water Investment Program, which I lead, the Secretariat on behalf of the African Union, which is a key flagship initiative of the continent adopted by heads of state to help mobilize resources to cover the investment gap on the continent. I'm pleased to report that we have made significant progress, and most of you are aware the heads of state panel launched a high-level panel investment action plan worth $37 billion at the COP28, and we are now moving into the implementation of that investment action plan with a high-level ministerial event we are convening with the African Development Bank on Tuesday, just across outside in the Scandic Hotel on Tuesday, and you're all invited. So at that event, the African Union is also going to announce the 20 countries that will be receiving financing support from different AIP partners and AU partners to implement climate resilient water investment programs. And because most of the country rivers in Africa are shared, this means these will be conduits also to strengthen transboundary cooperation, the linkages at the national level and their neighbors. So this is an important initiative. And the 20 countries will be announced by the African Union. In conclusion, colleagues, I also want to physically welcome you on behalf of the AU to this event, and also SADC and our partners who are organizing this important event, and encourage you to be active and contribute as we try to strengthen the transboundary water cooperation as pillars of peace and cooperation to address not only investments in water or water security issues, but also to strengthen the country's responses to climate emergency measures, and also for SADC member states and the River Basin Organization to respond to the recent call by the heads of state in Harare on the 17th of August, as I mentioned, to put in place urgent measures to respond to the impacts of droughts. And transboundary water cooperation is definitely going to be the key foundation for that. Thank you very much, moderator, for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Alex, for a very powerful statement, and I think you've provided the context. So in the interest of time, I'm going to just take you through our esteemed panelists and presenters. So we've got Dr. Madeleine Nyiratuza, who's the Regional Technical Advisor for Water, Oceans, Ecosystems and Biodiversity at UNDP. We also have Mr. Tariro Saruchera, who's the Regional Program Manager for Integrated Water Resources Management at IUCN. We've got Dr. Chlorine Katillo, who's the Transboundary Water Governance and Environmental Specialist at GWPSA. We have Mr. Elisha Madamombe, who just walked into the room, so we're very happy to have him. He's just come off his flight, so we're going to delay his presentation a bit, and he's the Regional Coordinator also at GWPSA, and he's the Interim Executive Secretary for Bubusacom. We have Mr. Sylvanias Uona, who's the Regional Project Coordinator for GWPSA, also Acting Executive Secretary for Cuvicom. And we have Mr. Sergio Sitoe, who will join us online. He's the Executive Secretary for LIMCOM. And last but not least, we have Ms. Leonisa Abuino Mujob, who's the Information, Communication and Partnerships Manager at ZAMCOM. So we've got most of our river basins represented on the panel, but I know we do have some of our river basins present in the room. We have the Executive Secretary for RASACOM. We're pleased to have you here as well in the room. So without much further ado, we're going to start off with our program by hearing from some of the river basins. And we've just slightly changed the order because Pubusa was supposed to start, but just giving Mr. Madamombe some time to take a breath. We will start with Mr. Sylvanias, who will give us a presentation on Cuvicom. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dear participants, my name is Sylvanus, has been mentioned, Unona, and I'm the Regional Project Coordinator for the Kuvala and Kunene projects that is funded by GEF, Global Environment Facility, through UNDP, and being executed by the Global Water Partnership Southern Africa. So I'm honored to be here and also to give you a presentation on a lesson learned through the transboundary cooperation agreements in SADC region, and looking at the challenges and also some opportunities. Okay, having said that, SADC region is very much rich in the natural diversities. Looking at some transboundary rivers, we have about 30 transboundary river basins or watercourses, with also some about 30 transboundary aquifers, my corrections, and also about more than 15 major river basins transboundary. So that actually gave the significance of these resources and also give us the enhance the growth in demands and also some cooperation, which is actually being enhanced by the guided by our regional protocol, the SADC revised on shared watercourses. Is it? Yes. Having said that, we have about 15 major river basins and also 30 transboundary aquifers. And with some of these rivers basins, like Zambezi, Limpopo, and Orange, which covers numerous countries, and that really have necessitated the need for the co-management of these resources. And some of the key institutional framework for these river basins are such as Zambezi Watercourse Commission, the Orange Senkyu River Basin Commission, and also some LICOM, and many others, the Bupusas, the Kuvecom. I only highlighted the key ones that transverse many countries. And like what I said, we also have in SADC region the legal framework that actually promote the fairness, the utilization of these resources in actually the fair and also that fostering trust among these member states. Some of the key challenges are the hydrological variabilities in SADC region and also the governance issues, and others data sharing gaps, which actually reduce the effective collaboration among the member states, and that actually necessitated or give the need for mechanisms for countries to cooperate through the agreements, be it the data sharing agreement, information sharing agreements, and also the general river basins agreements that we are talking about here today. Yes, in terms of the hydrological availability and climate change, SADC faces some higher climate vulnerability due to its exposure and also these extreme weathers. And it's also observed that there is a lot of extreme weathers events at over 50% in the last 2 decades. I think it's evident in the SADC region. And also in terms of the rainfall variability, in some part of the SADC region, rainfall has decreased by about 20% in the last 30 years. Actually evident also in many countries in the SADC region. And the climate model also projected that about 10 to 20%, there is also a reduction in surface water availability. And that actually also projected that the water availability will reduce in the next 50 years. And actually, there's also evident in the El Nino, 2015 to 2016, that really hit Zambezi River Basin, especially the Kariba Dam. I think it's also a known fact for some of us who are from the SADC region. So I think this all impacted on agriculture and also energy production, especially for the Zambezi region. And what are the institutional challenges? Mostly the institutional and governance challenges in financial and human resources constraints that hits among our member states. And also the varying levels of political commitments are different in commitments result in delays in decision making and also implementing some joint projects among the member states. And further than that, it's also the alignment of policies to the regional agreements. In terms of data sharing and information management, the excess challenges in sharing information, the disparities in acquiring these data, and also the concern from countries regarding the information changes, and also the need for the regional platforms in data sharing and also capacity initiatives are mostly crucial for improving the information management. And there are also numerous opportunities from the challenges that I've earlier mentioned. So one of them is leveraging the regional integration, advancing in climate resilience through the joint initiatives, such as the CREDEF and also the African Investment Program, and also harnessing some technologies through, for instance, the SACOF or SADC high cost, and also the multi-stakeholders initiatives through the region. In terms of leveraging regional integrations, I've earlier said that it's also good that countries or member states should align their objectives to the regional goal, especially for the regional infrastructure development master plans that is spearheaded by the SADC Secretariat, and also looking at the multi-purpose infrastructure and transfer schemes within the region, and as well as the coordination and investment efforts where countries should coordinate and also plans to join investment for transboundary water infrastructure projects. As I've earlier said, advancing the climate resilience through joint initiatives, I've mentioned the Africa investment programs. I think countries should also looking at tapping from these programs, and also the climate resilient infrastructure, the CREDEF. One example is a project in Bibusa for water storage and air warnings, and as well as collaborative efforts for resiliences. Yes, we should also look at one of the opportunities harnessing the technological innovations, looking at the advancement of the Earth observations, remote sensing, and also data analytic. So this is to incorporate tools to enhance data collection, analysis, and also real-time tracking of informed decision-making, and looking at the Southern Climate Outlook Forum that's offering seasonal climate forecast that is crucial for strategic planning and decision-making in the region, and also enhancing the SADC hydrological cycle observing system, which is providing real-time data on river flows, river patterns, and also the hydrological data, enabling the proactive measures for management, and also enhancing the trust and information exchange platform which is fostering transparency and also trust by establishing the shared platforms for seamless and information exchange among the stakeholders. Yes, stakeholders engagement is crucial, looking at importance of inclusive participation with involving local communities, private sectors, and also civil society, and also as well as a multi-stakeholders engagement where government come up with platforms to share information and also to engage local communities that will ultimately leading to livelihood improvement and also socio-economic development, and also establishing platforms for different stakeholders to create opportunities for dialogue that will enhance decision-making, and also consensus building on critical topics among stakeholders on water allocations, environmental protection, and as well as infrastructure development, which is very much crucial for sustainable development and conflict resolution. And what are the lessons learned from the SADC region is like its adaptability is a key, like looking at the flexibility and adaptability, crucial for water management strategies, and also the institutional strengthening, where it's enhancing the River Basin Organization through capacity structure dialogues and also information sharing, the data-driven decision-making, reliable data essential for transboundary water management success, and also the regional integration synergies, whereby aligning water management with broader regional goals like the infrastructure development showcased by the cross-border water projects supporting the economic integration. Yes, in my conclusion, I would just like to say that valuable lessons from the SADC region. SADC experiences offers insight from managing shared water resources and fostering collaboration, and also persistent challenges in terms of climate change impact, institutional limitation, and also data sharing issues continue to pose the obstacles and opportunities for enhancement, for improvement, cooperation through the regional integration, teachers innovations, and also including the stakeholders' engagement, and also building on the progress made by leveraging lessons and also addressing challenges to strengthen transboundary water management in the region. So, in conclusion, it's to call to action to empower water security and regional prosperity through the unified effort in the SADC region. So, I thank you. Over to you, Madam Bondarita.
So thank you very much. So Sylvanus has really given us an overview of the current enabling environment in the SADC region. He's looked at it from the policy perspective. So we've got, as Alex already mentioned, we've got key instruments for cooperation, but the challenge remains with implementation and some of the issues that he outlined, particularly around financing and human resources. So with that, I'm going to request now one of our speakers who's online, Mr. Sergio Sitoe, to give us some overview around exploring the strategies and innovation in a dwindling long-term financial support from historical partners. So as already mentioned, the river basins are SADC institutions, and we need to keep them viable and sustainable. So let's hear from Sergio in terms of how LIMCOM is approaching it in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and colleagues who are on the panel. Thank you for this opportunity to share our experience on Transboundary Water Corporation. I'm going to present, to share with you. Allow me to share my presentation. Sorry.
Sergio, may you kindly show your video?
Yeah, my network is a bit unstable, so that's why I just went on and off. But let me try. So let me try to keep it on. But so allow me to share my presentation. Oh.
Sergio, we can see the presentation. Can you see it on your side?
Yes, I can see it now. I
Okay.
can see it.
Can you go ahead? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to put it on a slideshow.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll be presenting on exploring innovations in drilling and long-term financial sustainability from a historical partner in creating pathway for sustainable transboundary cooperation. And this is going to be the layout of my presentation. I'll be dwelling a bit on Limpopo or River Basin, transboundary cooperation, fundamental requirements for effective transboundary water cooperation, both looking at the technical but also the financial constraints. But then I'll also dwell a little bit more on financial mechanisms for transboundary water cooperation, and then I'll talk on a pathway for transboundary institutions to achieve sustainability. So the map that you see on the screen is the Limpopo River Basin, which is shared by 4 member states. namely Botswana, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. And allow me to say that this basin is has an area of almost 412 square kilometers, is at 1,700 long, is one of the major basins in Africa. The population is the base around 21 million people. And the cooperation within those member states, it dates back to early 80s, where those member states they established what they called the Limpopo Basin Technical Committee. And with the signing of the revised protocol on shared watercourse in 2000, LIMCO embarked on a new agreement for the establishment of the Limpopo Watercourse Commission in 2003. And that agreement entered into force in 2011, meaning 8 years after it has been signed. And in 2014, the political commitment came into to play its role, where the ministers from all the 4 member states, they established the secretariat so that they allow the effective management of the Limpopo River Basin. And in 2018, a substantive executive secretary was put in place in Maputo. So this is just to share with you, some of the events where we have a ministerial commitment and a high level commitment in the riparian states. Those are the ministers of the 4 countries of the Limpopo River Basin launching formally, the JEF-funded project in 2014 in South Africa. So in terms of water cooperation, fundamental prerequisites for water or requirements for water cooperation, I'll then talk a bit on the technical point of view, where we all know that the sustainable and cooperative management of transboundary water resources are crucial for securing access to water, sustainable development, as well as stability and peace. There is a need for the member states that share the river system to develop and implement cooperative models that ensures collective understanding of shared water-related problems and associated root causes within the basin, development of a joint response strategy, and implementation of a joint basin plans. Joint basin monitoring actions needs to also be been taken, and also utilizing them so that we can, with all those actions, create what we think that continuous trust building among the technical people and also other levels for the management of the basin. So with this, we believe that the member states and RBOs, they need to continuously share experience, challenge, and goal and good practice in implementing national activities with transboundary implications. Looking at the financial side of cooperation, we believe that a commitment from riparian states is also a key. Although we all know and recognize the financial capacity constraints faced by the countries in financing national plans and transboundary water corporations. Reason why effort and also needs to be continuously made by the governments of those countries that share the systems to continuously commit, at their annual budget, some financial resource to run, the river basin organizations. The challenge here is also posed because we all know that some of the countries that are in Southern Africa, particularly, they share more than one basin. If you take, for instance, the example of Mozambique, it shares 9 out of 15 river basins that are in Southern Africa. So there is a huge challenge in terms of financial capacity, to contribute to those river basin organizations that have been established. But in spite of those constraints, member states and RBOs are committed to financial resource mobilization for transboundary water cooperation and implementation of a basin developmental activities. So with this, we will see that most of the RBOs that have been established in Southern Africa in particular, the establishment process or the operational of a joint management board included implementation of a basin plans and strategies that were initiated with support of what we call international cooperating partner. And here I'm referring particularly to the traditional or the historical partners that were operating in Southern Africa. And I give you some example that includes the GIZ, the Netherlands, SIDA, USAID, EU, or OECD, World Bank, the NIDA, United Kingdom Agency for International Development, UKAID, BMZ, just to mention some. And I said, and the support from these from those ICPs were going to 2-3 year cycles, and these, also applied all on its sustainability implications. So while the traditional partners supported the establishment process and activity plan and the implementation of the plans, the member states, they also made they made sure that they could ensure ownership and contribute with a core costs that includes river basin governing boards, secretariat running costs, staff costs, costs for communication and information dissemination, cost of office equipment, vehicles, and other items required for physical functioning of the RBOs. And ladies and gentlemen, it is clear and it's noted that currently the financial support from historical partners is phasing out or even changing priorities or financing modalities. They are in this particular time, somehow changing. And a new trend has been established where mostly the RBOs are supported through new source of international financing. In this particular case, I'm referring to international climate funds. So most of the transboundary water cooperation activities and related management and development of those river basins are funded by organizations like, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, the Global Environmental Facility, the Green Climate Funds, Adaptation Funds, and other global climate funds. And it's important to highlight that although there is that support from those organizations, it's still a prerequisite, for the RBOs and countries to engage through accredited institutions to global climate funds. And the accreditation of transboundary water cooperation institutions on joint boards is still very limited. And exactly because of that, we are of the opinion that capacitation of RBOs in terms of how accreditations can be done, it needs to be undertaken. If you look, for instance, as what we have in terms of institutions that transboundary operates in transboundary space, only from what I know, I stand to be corrected here by colleagues, only the Saharan Sahel Observatory, OSS, undertook a successfully accreditation process with GCF. So that on its own, it constitutes a challenge for the RBOs to continue implementing activities that they plan, but also it's a clear indication that shortfalls in terms of how the activities and plans that are being put in place can be covered. So we need to make sure that the RBOs, can cover those shortfalls to achieve sustainability and effectively fulfill the role of the basin, wide coordinator and implementers of the basin plans and climate change adaptation measures, in place. So this considers a commitment from member states that are part of the joint body and also or even management institutions. So with that in mind, although we are benefiting as LIMCON, we are also benefiting from that support from a number of those institutions that I mentioned. We applied for some of those funds. We are currently being supported by JEF through UNDP to implement a program that is currently ongoing. We realize that there is a need for institutions like LIMCON to initiate discussions toward long-term financial sustainability pathway, and as one of the fundamental prerequisite conditions for the effective implementation of its mandate. So LIMCON intends to undertake a mapping exercise of the fundamental barriers preventing RBOs and LIMCON in particular to attain required financial sustainability status, generate a horizon scan of existing entry or leveraging points with substantive potential to support process of counterbalancing such barriers to financial sustainability. Formulate skeletons of the first approximation of the response strategic plans for repositioning LIMCON on the pathway to long-term financial sustainability. So we need to embark in brief into innovative financing mechanisms. And with that, we need to make sure that we bring private sector into the water box through public partnerships, establishment of endowment funds, or hybrid funds model that combines revolving funds, seeking funds, and other alternatives. For this, but for the endowment fund, for instance, we have our sister RBO, the Kubango Okavango, already testing this in the basin. So we think that we can learn from the experience of this river basin, and ultimately, it will be critical to continuously access, communicate, and demonstrate the benefit of transboundary water cooperation and basin development. Build a strong legal and institutional framework, which include strong engagement of stakeholders, including the private sector, viewed as a crucial steps for fundamental identification of entry or leveraging points for transboundary institutional financial resource mobilization toward long-term sustainability. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. So bringing some issues here again in terms of the challenges around financing. So like Sergio articulated, we know there's funding out there. You've got the climate finance, but one of the big challenges, as he's articulated, is the ability of some of our sectors to be able to engage and understand how to access this finance. I think we've been given a good example of funding that will be announced, I think tomorrow, I think you said, Alex, on Tuesday, where we're learning how the water sector has been able to leverage from the Green Climate Fund. I think here, as UNCCD, we are now actively engaging with the river basins, and our COP for this year is focusing on building drought resilience. So again, it's a space that I think the RBOs need to engage in more so that they can see what are the sources of financing there are. And I think another key factor that's coming out is just around looking at the river basins as investment vehicles. So looking beyond just the water space, but looking at how else they can contribute to national development as investment vehicles. Now, the next presentation builds nicely from this one, and now we're going to hear from the Pubusa, and here we've got a unique situation where I think we see some efficiency in river basin planning, where we've got two countries that are exclusively sharing three basins, and how they've come together to foster cooperation. So I'm going to invite Mr. Madamombe to present on the Pubusa COM. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. My apologies also for coming a bit late. Yeah. Right, okay, so the topic here will be promoting peace in the SADC region through transboundary water cooperation. The role of diplomacy, data information, science, and evidence in facilitating and negotiating towards transboundary agreements and development of the Pubusa roadmap. So that's what I'll concentrate from the experience that we've attained over the last 20 years. Right, so my presentation will be as follows. We'll look at the background information, the brief history of cooperation between Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and what are the drivers for the cooperation in the Pungwe, Buzi, and Sawe, the three river basins which are exclusively shared by Zimbabwe and Mozambique. Then we also look at the legal framework for the cooperation on transboundary water resources, lessons learned. What have we learned over the 20 years or so that have been cooperating? And also, what are the benefits that we've derived so far in terms of transboundary cooperation? And then we look at what is the focus? What are we looking forward to beyond the signing of the agreements? And also acknowledge partners who have played a big role in order to make this a success. So my starting point is, I'll start off with a map. Anyway, by the way, I'm Elisha Madamombe. I'm the Pubusa Project Coordinator working under GWP and also the Interim Executive Secretary for Pubusa. So here is the map of the three river basins. We see right at the top where the Pungwe, it's just about 5% in Zimbabwe, but contributing over 20% of the mean annual runoff. Then what in the middle there, where the Buzi Basin, about 12% of it in Zimbabwe, but contributing also almost 20%. Then we've got the bigger chunk, which is the Sawe River Basin. This one is 85% in Zimbabwe and 15% in Mozambique. But I must say at this stage that the Sawe River Basin is heavily developed. A lot of dams, a lot of interbasin transfers, because it's a dry area, but also the agroclimatic conditions are suitable for sugarcane, etc. So it's one of the key areas for agriculture in Zimbabwe. Right, so in terms of the background, most of the stuff I've already said, that the two rivers are shared by the two river basins, and the rivers all start in the eastern highlands of Zimbabwe, where there's a lot of rainfall, but the rainfall dwindles as you go towards the Indian Ocean. Right, the three basins have a total area of about 150 square kilometers, and the basin has a population of over 7 million, and over 70% in terms of are below the poverty datum line. The basins are also very much affected by extreme events, which Alex just talked about. The example of the cyclone Idai in 2000, but later on I also show other cyclones that did happen. Right. In terms of the contribution, I've just highlighted that in Mozambique, the Buzi is about 85% contribution and 15% from Zimbabwe. Pungwe is about 20% from that 5% catchment. And the Sawe, it's almost 85% that is coming from Zimbabwe. But heavily committed, very little water flows into the Indian Ocean. So that's another a source where you can actually have conflict, but we've tried to avoid that through diplomatic channels. Right, maybe just as a starting point, I'm just talking about the history of cooperation between Mozambique and Zimbabwe in terms of how the two countries have cooperated over the years, and also how ICPs have come in to support the process. It all starts in the 1990s when there was a series of droughts, and Zimbabwe and Mozambique almost came to a point where they were going to fight. So they sat down, presented some statistics. I was also in the room, and they totally disagreed. So the solution was to actually go to the Pungwe River to see how much water was flowing and how much water was being abstracted. And the two countries came to know that virtually there is no water flowing, there is no abstraction taking place. So then after that they decided, okay, now but why don't we then start working together? They started off by developing a joint water commission agreement, and did a series of studies that were done, monographs, I think over 15 of them in the river basin. And once they got to that level, they then said, I think we have a better understanding of the Pungwe River itself. So why don't we move on to developing some agreements? So the starting agreement was the Pungwe Agreement, which was finalized in 2016. And following that, there was another agreement, the Booz Agreement, which was signed in later on, I think in 2017. And then we had the SADC Agreement. That took some bit of time, I think because of the complexity of the agreement. But we navigated through it and managed to have it signed last year. Okay, I've talked about the main drivers that brings about the two countries together: the issue of climate change, the issue of pollution, water quality concerns. I'll show some bit of pictures where there's actually serious pollution taking place. We have also the problem of saline water intrusion. Particularly, this affects mainly in Mozambique, which is abstracting water for the city of Beira and other areas close to the ocean. So the more you develop upstream, the less water goes to the Indian Ocean, and therefore saline intrusion tends to increase. We also have the problem of deforestation and land degradation that is taking place, where people are cutting down trees and so forth in order to have firewood and also for selling. Then the problem of groundwater, which I'll talk about, which we don't fully understand how much groundwater is available. Then we've got the issue of coastal ecosystems degradation. That is also taking place. Right, these are the rainfall anomalies that are experienced in the Bupusa region. You can actually see that there's quite a lot of fluctuations, some negative anomalies which cause droughts, and also positive anomalies which cause floods. So this we've got to learn to live with. Example of what took place quite recently, 2019, Cyclone Idai in the Buzi Basin, where almost 800 people perished. Right, this one is about water quality. There's a lot of gold panning taking place in both Zimbabwe and Mozambique on the Buzi River. So this is the quality of water that you end up getting. Also another example is the Savi and the problem of droughts, quite common. Right, land degradation, right. So we then get on to the legal framework for cooperation on transboundary water resources. We have all these agreements between Zimbabwe and Mozambique. The SADC one, which is signed by all the SADC countries. Then we've got the Mozambique-Zimbabwe Joint Water Commission, signed in 2002, when they discovered that, well, we did not have enough information and we have to cooperate. Then we've got a series of cooperation agreements, and just last year, we had the three agreements which were signed, the Bupusa Establishment Agreement and the Bupusa Hosting Agreement. All these agreements have since been ratified. So that shows how serious the two countries are in terms of managing the water resources. Right. So you see that all those agreements that we have worked on are actually very much in compliance with the water conventions, although sometimes they don't specifically mention that. The issues mainly are to do with safeguarding sustainable water management, prevention and mitigation of harm, protection, preservation and conservation of the environment. So those are the main issues which are in the agreements. Right. So what lessons have we learned? For the first time in my life, I saw a situation whereby you cannot just rely on science. You need the political buy-in. I'm one of those people who never used to want to meet very much with politicians in order to talk about water, but you need this definitely if you are going to progress. So you find that in the case of Mozambique and Zimbabwe, it's even at presidential level, the two presidents coming together to witness the signing of the agreements. That's how serious the whole thing is. Right. The other thing is a collection and synthesis of data is key in providing evidence before any negotiations can commence. This is what the two countries had to go through to avoid fighting. Initially, no one knew how much water is coming from where. But because of the support we got from SIDA, we started collecting a lot of information and then synthesizing the information, which was then used in the agreements. Then there's the issue of stakeholder engagement. I think this is also very important. Over the years, what we've been doing is, before we start any negotiations, we would go to the stakeholders in both Zimbabwe and Mozambique, start to talk to them to say, this is what we intend to do, and this is what will be contained in the agreements. Then the stakeholders will also have their own input to say, okay, maybe you can proceed with this, but we also need to see this reflected in the agreements. And that's the way we've been working right from the onset when we started the negotiations and in between and right at the end. Right. Then the other thing is, it is very important to warm up to any negotiations. The countries have to agree on how the meetings will be done and so forth, and what are the milestones and so forth. Put in a monitoring and evaluation framework so that everyone is very clear where we are and where are the shortfalls. And at each stage, we report back to the principals to say, we are stuck at this stage. Can you advise us how we proceed? And often the principals, they come together to agree on how to proceed. Ownership for these agreements should lie with the member states. So the way we went about it was to make sure that the lawyers, the engineers, and so forth from governments were part to the negotiation team. In fact, they were leading the negotiations. Our role was simply to facilitate and give some technical input in the process. And then the other one is on training. I think it is very important that if member states second staff for training, you then need to make sure that the seconded staff are almost at the same level of understanding so that when the process begins, the negotiations begins, all the people will be equipped to deal with the matter. Okay. And also very important is the need to respect the views of member states. Yeah, this one is quite a complicated one, as we actually, as we saw in the signing of in the Survey Water Sharing Agreement, there was a lot of fights on how much water should be shared and so forth, but we found a way around it. What we simply did was to say, let's pack, because anyway, our agreements consist of two sections. The first section is the legal section, then the annexes. The annexes are detailed studies that would have been conducted and information synthesized to say, okay, we're going to share so much water. In our case, the SADC agreement, which is the last agreement, we just decided, okay, let's pack this, let's get more information, then come back and revise the agreement. And hence, this is why we have a provision for reviewing the agreements when information becomes available. And also, during the process of the negotiations, it is very important that the staff members from both countries participate in joint monitoring, be it flow measurements, be it water quality measurements, and so forth. That builds confidence, and also you avoid the situation whereby another country is said to be not to be transparent. So it's always good to work together. And then where you have some problems in terms of information, you also need to involve independent external technical support where evidence decision making is required. I think this is very important, particularly for the annexes, because the level of skills that we might have in government might not be enough to actually address information that will be required in the technical annexes. And then also, as we were doing these deliberations, we already started sharing information, through real time and so forth. That also builds confidence in the two countries. And then the other thing is joint studies. These have been carried out. These are being carried out, particularly on environmental flows and floods at this stage. This also builds onto the confidence of whatever work that we are doing. Just to say that the agreements that we have, the Pungo, the Buzi, and the Sawe, when we developed them, the section on environmental flows was rather gray because we used some desktop hydrological assessment. But we then agreed as a negotiation team that later on let's revisit these agreements and ensure that we put the correct figures. So I'm glad to say that through the JEF project, we've managed actually to work on one of the rivers, the Pungo River. We now have environmental flow requirements, and this now we are kind of annexing them to the agreement. And similarly, we're going to do the same thing on the Buzi and the Sawe. We also continue to have these pre- and post-seasonal meetings. Well, this is just to build confidence within member states so that they continue to engage and discuss water resources issues. Just to say also, the lack of data cannot be an excuse for not proceeding with the negotiations. You can use secondary data and then come back to the agreements once you have got better information. Because of time, I will not talk much about the benefits that we are having now. Just briefly to say that we've got organs which are up and running, and offices have been set up already, and we've got a strategic action plan which is already in place. It's completed, are waiting to be signed by the ministers, and the government of Zimbabwe and Mozambique, government of Zimbabwe is already granted a no objection to the construction of dams in Mozambique. This just shows the confidence and the benefits of transboundary cooperation. We have also developed some hydrometric real-time sharing equipment, stations which are up and running, and we are developing the floods and droughts strategy. So all these benefits are now accruing because of what we are doing. Right, so much about the agreements. Then as we were discussing, as we were going through the discussions, we then picked up quite a number of issues which member states wanted addressed. And so we developed a roadmap for the implementation of some of these critical issues which we felt they were very necessary. So this is one of the roadmaps that we've developed to make sure that we have a stakeholder forum in place and also a sustainable finance strategy. I think you might have heard the previous speaker talking about the finance strategy. I think this is one of the issues which are very much seized with. And then a number of critical projects which are some of which are these ones, the institutional development and updating of the roadmap, setting up relevant organs and so forth. And then development of bankable projects, since the major problem that we face is on climate, deteriorating water quality, land degradation, and sustainable groundwater utilization. Just to say, the agreements that we have at the moment do not have much information about groundwater. So this is one of the issues that we are going to be looking at. Yeah, just to end by thanking SIDA, which did quite a lot of work, Usain Bridge Project, the SADC GIZ, GWP has been with us throughout, and also Resilience Waters Program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, as I mentioned, a very rich experience. We have many years of serious negotiations, but as the speaker said, what triggered this collaboration was drought. So, in the SADC region, although it appears to be a peaceful region, the frequency of droughts, the increasing droughts, are one of the key things that could, again, start aggravating situation in the countries. I think from the experience working in the region, I think one of the key things he mentioned is the joint water surveys, where upstream countries and communities are learning and seeing what's actually happening downstream, and the same vice versa, because there's always an assumption. I think he mentioned that there was a lot of, Mozambique assumed that Zimbabwe is abstracting a lot of water, yet in actual fact it was a drought year and there actually wasn't a lot of water in the system. So just that understanding, trust building, and the number of years it's taken for this to happen. So before I move on, I think we've heard all the rich presentations, so thank you very much to the presenters. We've got some people online who also would like to share some of their experiences, but before we move to them, I just wanted to ask if there are any burning questions in the room, so that when the online speakers speak, they can also try to address any of those questions. Any burning questions? Yes, please. I'm not sure, yeah, and how it works. Can we have a mic, please, so that the online speakers can hear?
Thanks to the presenters. My name is Ramateu. I'm from South Africa, Randwater. I just want to, in the presentation, I didn't pick up what are the conflict resolution mechanisms in terms of if there are conflicts in the transport in the relationship between the two countries. So I would like to have that, because, and also what is the impact of political change in the respective countries in relation to the agreements and negotiations that are underway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more? Okay, so I'm going to move to the online speakers, and I hope you've heard those questions, so that when you're responding, to save time, you can try and tackle them. So the one is around the conflict resolution mechanism within the agreements, and the second one is on the impact of political change. So I'm going to go to Dr. Laureen Katillo, and listening to all the presentations we've had, I would like you to highlight to us what are the primary challenges that are faced in the region, particularly in the context of the increasing drought frequency. I think this is a big issue right now in the region, so I'd like to hear your perspectives in terms of how these challenges can be managed in the context of transboundary water management. Laureen, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine, and good afternoon, good day, everyone. So I think just picking up from the speakers, we can already see some of the issues that we highlighted. The aspect of, if I can start with Limcom and Limpopo, the aspect of diminishing resources, financial resources, in terms of addressing the issue of increasing drought frequencies. And also just the aspect of difficulty in or not having adequate information in terms of the situation regards water flows and also the management of water allocation equitably. The example that was given from Bopusacom concerning the Pungwe. So one can then conclude with the realization that, most of the issues, and I think it's already mentioned by the presenter, is around the policy implementation or operational level. So we do have the SADC protocol, which speaks to equitable and reasonable utilization. But in the context of increasing drought frequency, then there is difficulty in predicting the actual amounts as they inform allocations. While we do have the regional stack of projections in terms of a drought or flooding, we do realize that the structures that are in place are sometimes not efficient in cascading the information down to the local level, where that actions are taken by individuals at the ward, district, even at the sometimes national level in terms of policy informing actual actions that inform adaptation. So the aspect of balancing now the competing water demand becomes an issue, not only across borders, but also between sectors, issues around how water is allocated for agriculture, energy, and how that translates the impact as a domino effect in terms of how that translates between the sectors. Another challenge would be the limited capacity of institutional frameworks, and that is primarily around how the information and the science translates into policy action, but also fundamentally how that translates into practice. So again, that example of how projections sort of cascade down and inform action in a timely way, and how currently there is more of, a reactive response, where then earlier on it was mentioned that a number of countries actually declared an emergency situation regarding droughts. And one can sort of reflect on what that means in terms of the level of preparedness of the region for preparing for these drought episodes. Then another significant challenge is also just the context in which drought occurs in the SADC region. We have an over-reliance on agriculture, and then there are high levels of poverty, and then the kind of response mechanisms are not ones that are built on building resilience per se, but that are looking to, because of limited alternative livelihood opportunities, we do have displacement and migration being one of the sort of responses that then happens. So when that happens, someone referred to fights in an earlier presentation. Mr. Madamobi was speaking to, there was a fight and so on and so forth. Just discussing the nature of the discussion that was happening during the negotiation. I was reflecting on the nature of fights that then also happen at the sort of individual household level due to some of this migration and displacement. And where we then have women-headed households, we have families being sort of split because of breadwinners moving within the region in order to sort of try to have alternative incomes. So that then has a domino effect as well. It has got on other sectors, not necessarily water, and on the sort of regional economy. So
I'm going to break you because we've got other speakers and we only have 15 minutes left. So if you could just quickly wrap up.
So in a nutshell, we realize that, I think there's a number of challenges that need to be addressed. And then in order to foster cooperation, we need to tackle the issues that bring around, sort of conflict because of the recurrence of drought. And it's good to notice that the dreams, the SADC, at the SADC level, the drought risk management and mitigation strategy is already in place. And what we need to do basically to address the challenges is to just follow through on the actions that are proposed in the strategy. Thanks, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laureen. So to pick up on that, I'm going to invite Tariro from IUCN. If you could share some of the lessons learned from past experiences in supporting river basins, which can inform future strategies, particularly within the context of this challenging situation we have in the region. Tariro, over to you. Is he online?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We just heard you. Yes, you're on. Please go ahead.
In our region specifically, what we may not appreciate, having seen what is happening also across the globe, is that I think we have had a very good head start in terms of water cooperation in the basins. In terms of regional frameworks, if you look at the shared protocol, protocol on shared waters, if you look at our policy and so forth, but maybe what we have not done well after that is what happens next. So I think this is where our lessons now should really focus on. And from what we have experienced in support to RBOs, my biggest concern, I don't want to call it a regret yet, but it's almost getting there, is we are not institutionalizing the knowledge we're getting from the interventions we're doing from both failures and successes. This should ordinarily be helping us to keep adapting our management of shared waters to follow the felt needs that keep changing, especially when we have to deal with new realities, including climate change, including urbanization, including changing water security and so forth. The other thing is we do not necessarily benchmark progress in any systematic way yet. So it kind of goes back to what I said in my first statement. And what do I mean by that? We do not have different stages of cooperation established. Once things have been signed, we sit there and then the bus is moving. Let it keep moving. Where is it going? How many stops does it have on the way? And when do we know that we've arrived? So that path is not being mapped up very well. It's a lesson that I think we should really take seriously. Otherwise, some of the emerging basins, including smaller ones in terms of landscape, I know there are no small basins, but some of the emerging basins cannot actually pick up lessons in the way they can, because the lessons are implied. They're not exactly expressly stated out there. I can also talk about dialogue. Now, the issue with dialogue is that we want to talk when there's something that needs to be ratified. We want to talk when there's something that needs to be corrected. But the idea of actually keeping talking is important in itself. Because these agreements, for example, that Engineer Madam was mentioning, come from discussions. Discussions happen when people meet, and they don't have to meet because there's a problem. Consistent, effective dialogue actually can bring a lot more innovations and solutions, and especially resources, that are, really needed in the spaces that you're working in. And further to that, I think one lesson, I like what Sergio said about demonstrating benefits. We do have some traditional benefits that you're aware of, like joint infrastructure. but they go way beyond that. Unfortunately, we don't always trace all of them. There are ecosystem services that become a huge benefit, especially to the basin populations. Remember, the benefits accrue at different levels in a basin. At a national level, at a transboundary level, also at a local level. You have the political and economic integration that you get at the national level. But at the local level, the lesson that we should keep learning there is there are people who get affected by floods, by drought, by a river running dry, or a river overflowing. What is the benefit of cooperation at that level to those people? And I think another elephant in the room, again, I think going back to Sergio's presentation, a lesson that has to make us think a little more outside the box is around sustainable financing, but not necessarily looking just at who is investing in our basins, but how we, the people who are in the basin, can invest in our own basin. And I think whether at national and local level, there are so many actions that can really be incentivized in order to make these investments happen. Investments don't always have to be financial. There's expertise that can come through, there's indigenous knowledge that can be utilized, and at the same time, there's plenty of goodwill that can really, be leveraged, whether from private sector, from public-private partnerships, and so forth. There's many that we can talk about, but these are some of the lessons we're learning as we keep going, and I think we are on the right path. I don't want anyone to think that, okay, we're just highlighting the bad stories. We are on the right path, but we need to, keep going in a certain way and being very deliberate about certain specific actions that can make our cooperation more robust. Very proud of the work we're doing in the basins, but let's keep our eyes on the ball. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Tariro. So giving us a nice summary of some of the challenges that we're facing. Now I would like to ask Madeline to come on board. So a lot of the projects that have been mentioned here, it's UNDP championing resource mobilization. We've run out of time and we will need to leave a little bit of time for Zamcom to speak. So Madeline, if I could invite you to just share the support that UNDP has been giving to the basins in the region. I think you've got most of the basins being supported by UNDP. Thank you. Over to you, Madeline.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for giving me the floor. Yes, UNDP has been supporting river basin organizations to support riparian states in cooperation for sustainable management and equitable use of shared water resources since 30 years ago. So we started with OCACOM on integrated water resources management in the Kubango-Kavango River Basin, and then ORASECOM in the Orange Senchu River Basin. And if I go back to the discussions that we are having here, where some of colleagues are talking about issues of inadequate financing, private sector engagement. I have a few examples that I want to share that other river basins can learn from. So OCACOM was able to create the Kubango-Kavango River Basin Fund. That is really a good instrument for innovative finance in the basin that different development partners and private sector actors can explore. And I want you, colleagues who are in Stockholm, to spread the word, to share that good news with the different stakeholders out there, because there is a lot of tourism development potential, for instance, in Okavango Delta, and there is a lot to explore there. So, and in the case of ORASECOM, I was really impressed by the engagement they had with the government of Lesotho and textile industries that use water from Hakare River to start the treatment of wastewater by themselves without JEF or UNDP money or any other donor. So I think sometimes it is a matter of really creating awareness and engaging private sector actors that we don't do enough. I have been talking to GWP South Africa and Limcom and the other colleagues that when you look at the water use in the SADC region, apart from textile industries and agriculture, we have mining companies where when we do our joint basin survey for environmental flows monitoring, we also look at water quality. But how do we often engage or involve mining companies in those surveys or talk to them to see whether they can also contribute to reducing water pollution? So I think it's a matter of joining forces and bringing more private sector actors, because for me, I think they may be willing to help, but we need to talk to them and bring them on board. So those achievements in terms of private sector engagement and innovative finance mechanisms are a few amongst several others. So UNDP GF projects start with what we call transboundary diagnostic analysis that shows us different issues at the regional level that are shared by member states. And from there, we support river basin organizations to develop strategic action programs that help them to advise governments on how they can work together to address shared issues in water resources use. And that's where the issue of promoting peace is very addressed, because they clearly understand what should cause conflicts if the country upstream uses more water and limit the amount of water goes downstream for the livelihoods of the riparian state population. And by agreeing on how water can equitably used in a sustainable way, it helps them to really solve issues amicably. So I think it is in that also framework that we are currently supporting Limcom and Uvecom and also IMACOM on Nkomati Maputo to ensure that those issues I'm talking about are really addressed, guided by frameworks and strategies that are developed with support of UNDP GF financing and signed as a workable agreements between riparian states that share water resources. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline. So I think I let Madeline go on because the on-site speakers might be cut off right now. I've got 2 clocks here. One is 2 minutes behind, so we've still got 2 minutes. And to wrap up, I'm not going to try and close, but what I am going to ask is a representative from the largest basin in the region. So ZAMCOM shares 8 of the 16 SADC countries, is the biggest basin and probably the most challenging in terms of financing. Most of the countries that are sitting in the room are all also part of the Zambezi. So I'd like to hand over to wrap up to Leonisa, who's just going to explain to us some of the innovation they found in terms of partnerships and resource mobilization in the Zambezi Basin. Over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Do I need to press anything now?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Catherine. Yes, so I'm from the Zambezi Watercourse Commission. People talk about ZAMCOM, but I thought you should know it's Zambezi Watercourse Commission. And yes, shared by 8 countries. And we've had challenges of financing, just like any other basin and any other organization that is trying to sustain itself. And so what we have found to work at the Zambezi Watercourse Commission is ensuring that we have a multi-sector approach. And that way we leverage financing. So when we talk about multi-sector approach, we're talking about World Water Week. I see us in future saying World Water, Land, Environment Week. That way you are bringing in other sectors so that you work in tandem in order to raise finances. And in that list of names that I put in terms of the World Water Week, it's World Finance Week, we realized the biggest challenge that we had in terms of financing our programs and in terms of ensuring that government is on board in terms of financing was not involving the ministries of finance. So we have gone into a partnership with the African Development Bank, with the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, with the Commonwealth Secretariat, Climate Investment Fund, and I'm not sure if I've left out another organization, but those are the key ones to implement what we have in place, which is the strategic planning, the strategic plan for the Zambezi Watercourse. So for us to implement that, we realized we needed a multi-sector approach, and we have brought in all those sectors that I'm talking about in order to raise finances. So we have a program that is called PDAC Zambezi, that is Program for Integrated Adaptation to Climate Change. And this program is being funded by the African Development Bank and a regional program and national programs. So we leverage finances by countries endorsing the program and undertaking to the African Development Bank that they will put in some seed fund, and that way the African Development Bank assists us in leveraging, raising funds through GEF, GCF, and so forth and so forth. And it is through that we now have the Climate Investment Fund, which is assisting us in developing the implemented investment plan for the Zambezi Watercourse. So having a multi-sector approach and leveraging financing, that is what we're talking about. And we're having more successes by working with other sectors in mobilizing resources in different sources in the Zambezi. And having brought on board the African Development Bank and UNCCD, as I've said, and Commonwealth Secretariat and all. Of course, we have not dismissed the idea of bringing in private sector. It is the most challenging to do. So we are taking it step by step to ensure that we bring in a private sector so that at least we do have that source of financing. And also to ensure that we are assisted in implementing some of our programs, we have a memoranda of understanding with different organizations that are like-minded organizations in Southern Africa and beyond as well, including other UN agencies apart from UNCCD. We're talking about UNESCO, we are talking about UNICEF, and you know these are not water-centric organizations. UNESCO is a scientific organization, UNICEF, you're talking about children, and we are also, you know, working with SADC GMI in terms of groundwater. We are working with WaterNet. We are working with the civil society and NGOs. I can go on and on and on, but I think what we need to realize is we cannot continue working in silos. This is a message that has been on and on for the past, I don't know how many decades, but we continue singing it because it's not happening. We are continuing, but it's happening. The multi-sector approach is happening. happening. And for us, that is what is working at ZAMCOM. I don't know if I can go any further, but trust me, we now are able to ask ministries of finance to do an endorsement letter, and they're able to do endorsement letters. And we've had endorsement letters for PDAC 1 and now PDAC 2, and even for the investment plan. And the GEF, was it the GEF? Yes, for the GEF, we got endorsement letters, and it's by working with these and making them feel relevant in terms of the water programs and so forth. Thank you very much.
Okay, so nice wrap up. And basically the message we're sending is the river basins can be investment vehicles, but they do need to become more multi-sector, because then they're able to leverage resources from other sectors. And also, like, I think everybody nodded, Ministry of Finance, if they're not at the table, it's very difficult, particularly to access financing, particularly national funds that they have access to. So we have to make the investment case, and it's easier and stronger when we go in as a force, as multi-sectors. And particularly in the region, I think our biggest challenge right now is drought, and therefore food security is an issue. We've got a lot of women who are really suffering and turning to things just to survive. So I think the key message for us, and please come to our COP in Saudi Arabia, we will be talking drought. Thank you.